diagram I've got up here demonstrates a key element about SyteLine. It is a fully integrated accounting environment across your enterprise. So transactions that the folks are doing in the shop floor, issuing material, reporting labor, those are going to create journal entries and feed the GL. Shipping will create journal entries and feed the GL. Receiving, projects you may do, service repair, field activities. Someone in the field reports that they just had $1,000 of hotel expenses. That's going to feed the GL from our service module. So everything flows through the GL, through to the GL. And as a result, everything is trackable back to its source transaction. I think a good place to start here might be with the general ledger chart of accounts and how we structure that and how you might leverage it for your world. So let's open this one. This fundamentally shows our chart of accounts structure. If you're a multi-site company, you'll have a site ID automatically tacked to the front of it. You guys are not. You're single facility, so site ID is not really important. Then we break up into 5 separate tables, what a lot of systems have in one table. So in the chart of accounts, we have what might be called the natural account. And then over there in unit code 1, that might be your departments or your product codes. Like you guys have the scheme, if I understand things right, you have your D1s, your D2s, your D3s. Those might be unit codes within our system. So if you had sales revenue of a printed product, a banner set, then you might see sales revenue as an account, and separate from that, over here in this product code, you would see whatever you've defined as banners as a product code. So those things together create the journal entry for you, and you can then sort, filter, and report on any combination of these things. We also have user-definable attributes that you can extend this with. So you can add, fundamentally, you can add additional columns out here to the right. Also, when we look at the chart of accounts themselves, of course, we have different types of accounts that you would expect, you know, the main 5, the revenue and expense, assets, liabilities, owner equity. But then we have some specialty accounts here and here, statistical and allocation. A stat account is some value you want to have every month for calculation purposes. So this may be number of employees. It could be employees by department. It could be square footage. And that way you can do calculations in our financial statements like what's my revenue by employee or what's my overhead by square foot. And then we have another specialty type of account called an allocation account. When you post to an allocation account, it distributes the posting by value to other accounts. So as an example, let's say you're paying rent and you want to put 10% of the rent to administration and 90% to manufacturing. Well, you usually have to break up a journal entry to do that. Here we can pre-establish an allocation account called rent, and the user can post to rent, and then under the covers it would distribute it for you either based on a percentage or perhaps based on a statistical account. So we could say, based on number of employees by department, I want to allocate my rent. So those are just 2 specialty concepts of that. If I drill into one of these so you can see one of the screens, there's a lot going on in this user interface, a lot of things happening. I'll try to sort of explain it as we go. I just drilled over to the chart of accounts, and I had it pre-filtered to only show me our revenue accounts. So all my 4,000 series you see down on the left here, these are all my revenue accounts, and we're looking at the detail of one of them on the right. One of the unique things about the SyteLine user interface is that not only does it have a form like you see here on the right, but it has this grid on the left, and you can work in the form or the grid. If I pull this aside, all the fields were in the form are also in the grid. I can do data entry here in the grid, say this has an effective date of 1st of this month, or I could do data entry here in the form by the same token. So it's really handy for, sometimes you need to look at something in a form view and it just makes more sense. Sometimes you want to enter things in a grid, sort of like an Excel spreadsheet, and that just makes more sense. As I create records here, you'll see these little orange symbols off to the far right. It means I've changed the record, but I haven't yet saved it to the database. At any point in time, I could hit the Save button, say, yep, go ahead and save it, or I could hit the Refresh button and say, no, I don't want to save it. Go retrieve the records as they were before I mucked with them. So we make heavy use of these grids throughout the system, and it really improves productivity for folks. You may see some of that as we move through here. But here we're looking at the detail of a account in the chart of accounts, in this case my sales revenue account. If you recall from this prior diagram, it was this one, we have these 4 unit codes, right? So if I go back here, we're now saying for this sales revenue account, which of those 4 unit codes are to be used? Well, in my environment, I've got unit code 1 set up as my departments, unit code 2 is my products, unit code 3 is my customer types, and unit code 4 is user defined. I haven't really done much with it. So I've said, yeah, I definitely want to segment my sales revenue by product line and by customer type. Maybe I want to see government versus education versus whatever your retailers, wholesalers, reps, whatever you may have as customer types. And then within each of those, so here's my unit code 2s. These are the product codes I've got set up in my system, and I know yours will be very, very different. But it gives you a sense of what you can now segment your revenue by and do analysis by. Anything you'd like to define, we could then analyze. Basically, if I ever needed to add another revenue account, I just add the account, indicate which of these are applicable, and the whole list would appear. And then if I wanted to say, so, I don't want this to be to be available in this particular account, I could delete it from the list. And now I only have I've limited my users as to what they could post to as a result. The other aspect of setting up the chart of accounts is we've got this nice feature here for effective and obsolescence dates. So if there's a department you've shut down and you no longer want that expense account available, you can say it's obsolete as of the 31st of December, and you can't post anything to it after that date. Or you're setting up a new department, you can make this account effective for transactions only after a given date. And then we can establish the account as a control account. That means that I don't want anybody to post directly to this account. Only the software, through the normal transacting, can post to this account. Typical examples of that would be accounts receivable. I don't want anybody doing a journal entry to AR. AR has to balance with my invoices, my credits and debits and payments. So I lock it down so only invoices, credits, and debits and payments hit AR. There is a security permission that you can give yourself. It says, I want to be able to post to that anyway, but it prevents the rest of the world from throwing you out of balance. So this is fundamentally the setup for an account in the chart of accounts. So what happens as a result of this? Let's pop back here and look at our flow. So we're getting all of our information feeding into the general ledger. And if I now look at the GL and say here, I'd like to filter this. So I've got my full general ledger. I can bring in thousands of transactions. Obviously, we're not interested in millions. We're coming here for a reason. So I can hit the filter button and say, I only want to see the transactions that hit my sales revenue account. And I could have done a pull down here to find the sales revenue account. I could put a date range. I could put other filters in here. But I say I'm only interested in the sales revenue and unfilter. It reads your general ledger and brings back a list of those transactions over here. So if I pull this aside, it becomes relatively simple to see those transactions and what they are, the credit or debit amount of each. But let's look at the detail here. I can see, okay, this is account 40,000 for my product line 2001, whatever that is. I think for me that's finished goods. Customer type 3,000, which for me I think are distributors. I have a credit of $84,000 that resulted from accounts receivable invoice number 10. Here's the customer behind this transaction. If this was an AP transaction, this would be the vendor. So I can see the customer, the vendor, all the other information of that transaction. But if I want to drill down even further, I can see all the credits and debits around that transaction. So hit these sales revenue accounts, We have some miscellaneous revenue accounts over here. Let's squeeze my grid up a little bit so we can see this better. So I can now see everything that hit all of this, and of course the balance hit accounts receivable. Well, what if I want more detail? This $84,000 credit, I want to know what that was. Well, that was for invoice number 10, customer order 107. If I drill into the invoice itself, I can now see all the line items of the invoice. Pick a line, see what the product was that was sold. In this case, our $84,000 came from the sale of 300 of these bicycles. And if I want to even drill further than that, this is really all I probably need to know, but I could drill down here into the customer order itself and then see, oh, okay, so this was sold to Coordinated Industries, and there's 5 line items on the order, and here's all my detail. So very easy to drill back into the detail that's behind the general ledger. If that detail had come from a job transaction, I can drill all the way to the job. If it was from a purchase order receipt, I could drill to the receipt, and so forth. If you have permissions, and we generally don't give this permission to all your users, it's something you may want to keep to yourself, but if you have permission to this button right here, you can go into design mode on any screen. And now for any field here, I could take that field, for example, and move it around. Or I could say, you know what, I want to hide that field. I'm going to make that a hidden field. And it's gone as far as you're concerned. Now, you also can do this at different levels. I could do this for the whole site. I could change or hide or make fields read-only for a group within the site or for a specific user. I may not want Betty to be able to see my inventory costs, so I can hide the cost fields from Betty. This also allows you to add new fields. So I could go over here and say I want to add a new edit field to this form, drop the field in, give it a label, and tie it to a data source here in the database. I can do what's called a binding. What do I want to tie it to? And you can tie it to existing fields, or you can create your own brand new field in doing this. So I'm not going to save my changes. I don't want to bother to mess up my form. So it asks me, hey, you've changed the form. Do you want to save it? No. So I've got this list of transactions. Let's just kind of talk briefly about reporting. I'd like to do an analysis of these transactions quickly on the fly. SyteLine has this very cool tool called a Dataview. A Dataview is basically an end-user columnar reporting tool. So I can say to the software, take all the transactions I filtered for. I just filtered for sales. Across all the years I have data in the system for. And I'm going to use this little button up here. I'm going to send this collection of records, this 613 records, out to a Dataview. Still looks like a grid, but there's a few things you can do here now. I can do things like move a column around. I could sort by any column, of course. But where this gets interesting is I could come in and say, I want to group my columns. So maybe I'd like to see my revenue grouped by product line. So I'm just going to grab that Unicode 2 and drop it in right there. So now I've basically done a pivot table. I've pivoted on my Unicode 2. And I can see for each Unicode 2, I've got some blanks up here, but this one, Unicode 2, 2001, I've got 255 items totaling $4 million in debits, $5 million in credits. If I open up that line, I can see the detail of what went into it. I can add defined columns. I can add a column called year and then pivot on my year column as well. Or I could pivot on any other value that we see in this grid. So perhaps I want to pivot by customer. So let's grab the customer name and drop it in there. And now I'm looking at a summary for Unicode 2001 broken down by customer. This is a great tool, and once you get the tool the way you want it, you can come up here and say, okay, save that layout. You can give it a name. You can make it your default layout. And if you have permissions, you can save it just for yourself or for a group of users or for the whole site. So everybody can have access to this particular report, assuming they have access to this module. They may not, obviously your whole company won't have access to the general ledger, but anybody who did have access to the general ledger would then see as an option this report that you've done as layout for. I'm going to drag these back out of here and unpivot this. And just for grins, let's go in and say we want to define a custom column. I needed the year. So let's create a column called year. And that data type is an integer. And we'll add that. And now you get a Excel-like designer. What do I want to do with this? Well, I'd like to take a date time function. I want to drag the year out of my date. So I come in here, and I can look for the transaction date. I think it's just called transaction date, this guy. So I'm going to take the transaction date and drag the year out of it, just like you would in Excel, right? And that drops that in all the way at the end here. So there's my year now, extracted for me from all of those columns. I could drag that year over to the front, or I could do something like this. I could say show all my columns, go down to the bottom of this, so you can drag my year and drop it in next to my date. Oops. I have to grab it to make it work. Now I can suddenly pivot by year. Okay, so that's the simple reporting aspect of a data view. And data views are everywhere in the software. You could be looking at customer order lines and do a data view like I just did, pivot on what was ordered and what was sold. I could be looking at job transactions on the floor. I could be looking at payroll. Data views are everywhere in the system. But then, of course, we have the aspect of, gee, I really want a more classic financial statement. So what we've done is we've done a financial statement plugin for Microsoft Excel. And over here under formulas, functions, oops, I'll get to a blank field so I can do that. We've added a whole list of SyteLine specific functions to Excel. These functions let you reach inside a SyteLine and extract data. So if I go to a blank sheet and do things like, let's just say I want to see my revenue for some periods of time. So I come over to here and say, let's query all of my revenue codes and drop them in right here. So it just read from SyteLine all your revenue codes. And I can come back to the functions and say I want to get the description of each of those codes. So then for each of these accounts, it reads live out of the SyteLine database, what is the description of the account? And then you can come in here and say, well, I want to see this for January, February, March, assuming I can spell. And I might come in and say, okay, let's add a function here. I want to see the balance. Oh, and I need a year. Let's do a year up here, 2016. And now let's put that function in. We're going to do the account code. We're going to do the period. Oops. Account code, period, and year. Say OK, and then drag it across to everything. Oh, and that's right. I need to put some dollar signs in here. That's E2. That a dollar sign. You guys know Excel, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've got to make this a dollar sign C. Let's try that again. That's better. So you get the sense, I could build from scratch a financial statement in any layout I wish. It's reading real-time data from SyteLine to do this. And it also adds some features here. If I right-click on that revenue for March, I can now drill down to what makes up that number. In this case, revenue is typically invoices and payments and credits and debits. I could have it open up the general ledger in SyteLine, or I could say, no, go grab from the GL all the transactions that make up that revenue amount and show it to me. So I just drilled down through Excel into the live ERP database and brought back all my revenue transactions for that period. So you have these methods. You can get real fancy, like here's a P&L using the same techniques I just showed you, but month to month with percentages, and again with the drill downs available to you. But we've pre-built a couple of report wizards here for you. I can come in and say, well, I'd like to just get a profit and loss statement. Let's go back to 2016 and, oh, I don't know, pick September and generate. Now reads live out of the database the way you've defined your chart of accounts and builds a profit and loss statement for you. I'm trying to give you the truthful impression. There's a lot of really nice tools here to get your financial data out pretty much any way you want it. Okay, so let's go back into the software. Some other features that are within the general ledger, of course, we do have budgets and plans that you can set up. Think of that as budget 1 and budget 2. If I drill over here, so for any particular account in your chart of accounts, let's do a filter, and oh, I don't know, maybe account 50,000 has something on it. So for a given account, for a given combination of unit codes, by period, you can have 2 budgets. We call one budget and one plan. It's really budget 1, budget 2. And those are also available to you on your financial report writer, so you can compare a period actual to a period budget. This is also importable, so you can write your, well, in fact, let's pop out to the spreadsheet here. One of our functions in the spreadsheet is to generate and upload the budget and plan. There we go. So I had to get the right parameters there. So it'll read whatever you have as the existing budget inside of SyteLine, present it to you out here in the spreadsheet. You can then come into the spreadsheet, change your budget numbers, and go back here and upload those back into SyteLine. We've done this because people want to use spreadsheets to generate their budgets. They want to do calculations, percentage of increases, compare numbers, have various versions before they come up with the budget they like, and then we just upload it right back into the software. The other piece I thought I should show you today is our homepage for the controller. So we've got multiple home pages in the software by different roles for different people. The buyer, the shop production foreman, the planner, the inventory manager, salesperson, customer service. Each of them has a home page. They all have this basic look and feel that you see here, but of course different data. So here in the case of the controller, all of these hyperlinks you see here will take the controller to those particular screens within SyteLine that he or she would use on a daily basis. This is an editable screen as well. You could drop more links into this if you had other screens you wanted to include, or take some out if you didn't use them. Then we'll show you some graphs of key information. But where it gets important is under this Navigator tab right here. The Navigator brings in a whole set of sub-tabs of different information at your fingertips. So in this case, I'm looking at a customer analysis. This is really a 30, 60, 90-day aging. It goes to 120 days really. Let's just bring it all in so we can see it. The nice thing here is we do, of course, have a printed AR aging. You can print out the report anytime you wish. But this is live, real-time data. You can do things like this, double-click on a column, sort the column ascending or descending. So if I wanted to see my biggest outstanding customers first, really easy to do. I could sort by any column. So maybe I'm really just worried about the over 120-day folks. So let's sort that. So here's my biggest 120-day past due customers, and maybe I want to start collecting on those. So you're looking at that, and in real time, you can just right mouse click on the customer form here, and it'll drill you over to the customer data for that customer. And from here, you can look at their credit tab and see what their credit limit is, what their posted balance is. Are they on credit hold or not? These guys probably should be. You also can set it up to automatically place a customer on credit hold based on the criteria you see down here. So if they're, say, over 90 days past due or over $125,000 past due, the system will automatically place the customer on credit hold if either of those thresholds are hit. Also, while you're sitting here on the customer master, maybe you want to know their payment history. What did they sell last year, this year? When was their last payment? What's their average days outstanding? All of these are calculated internally by the system with a utility at month end. So you have at a glance this customer status. SyteLine also includes a full CRM system, so you can set up all the sales contacts for the customer, sales territories, opportunities, estimates, etc., as well as a full interaction system. The interaction system is basically every time I have a conversation with a customer, I would like to record that conversation, perhaps have a follow-up time when I need to call them back. I can email out of the interaction system. I can also save emails into that system from my Outlook. We provide an Outlook plugin for that type of thing. So this is useful, of course, for sales, but also for AR collection. We also have vendor interactions for AP that let you do the same thing. So we have a full dunning system. You can design the email in HTML. It's got merge characteristics, so you can merge in, here's your outstanding balance, here's your list of invoices. You can automate those emailings. We have what are called background queues. So I can take any report and I can place it on a background queue and say, run this every week or every month or every day at this time. So I could put my dunning letters on a background queue and they would automatically generate for me. Part of that also is the customer document profile. The customer document profile lets you say for all of these different types of reports, where do I want them to go? So if I print an invoice, do I want the invoice to print or would I rather have it email for this customer? So for any one customer, you can say, for this report, whenever I generate invoices, email it to this address. And it could be multiple email addresses. So this is available both for customer-facing documents and for vendor-facing documents. And I can say for a given customer, let's say travel time, let's pick on this guy. Maybe I want to increase his credit limit from $35,000 to $40,000. So you can turn on a workflow behind this that when I save the record, let's see if I've got this turned on, save the record. So notice that I can enter in the field and then suddenly it's grayed out and it's reverted. That means there's a workflow active now against the record. We've gone out to the credit manager to ask for approval. So even though this person put that value in here, it has not taken effect as yet. Notice it just went away. I had a little message in my inbox in the bottom. So let's open up our inbox. There are two inboxes. There's the internal SyteLine inbox, which is this, or you can have these emails sent to you in your Outlook inbox or whatever email server you're using. So the credit managers receive this request. Request is made to change the credit limit of customer 7 travel time from $35,000 to $40,000. Please indicate your approval. So I go over to the response tab. Do I approve or disapprove? If I approve, it then processes that in the background, and we go back to the customer page. After the processing occurs in the background, this will ungray and will say $40,000 because we've approved it. So you can set up workflows throughout the software based on rules You can set a workflow that says if someone asks for a credit increase of more than 10%, send it to the credit manager. We also have rules pre-built for things like discounts on customer orders. If someone puts a discount over a certain percentage, freeze the order, send it to someone for approval. So we do have a full credit card integration for accounts receivable. So you can set a customer's terms as credit card, and then when they place an order, the order is placed on credit hold until you get a valid card from them that you authorize. That particular module, we of course do not store credit card numbers. They're all stored in the gateway in the cloud. We use folks like Authorize.net or SendPause or Tgate. So they store the credit card numbers for you. You never have that liability. But we get an authorization on the amount of the order, and then when you ship and invoice the order, we go out at that point and capture funds for the exact amount of the invoice. We also have electronic funds payment, so you can set up a vendor to be paid through your bank with an EFT file. We also have AR import between the bank and you, so you can import from the bank. If the bank's acting as your Dropbox and they receive the invoices, when they send you an electronic file of payment, we can import that directly into AR payments. You know, AP is very much a reflection of what you just saw. So if we pop into the vendor master, you know, there can be a purchasing vendor, but there could be separately a remit to vendor. So you may buy from this vendor, but remit to a different vendor or a different address. You can have electronic funds payment set up for that vendor. In fact, let's back over to general. You can see here the different payment methods that we support to pay a vendor. And if they were set up as electronic funds transfer, that enables all the fields over here where you can set up their account and all the other transfer information based on the type of transfer that you're using. We do, of course, have a full payment history for that vendor. And then from a purchasing perspective, we do show, are they on time in their deliveries and how have they been over a period of time. And then the general flow is much as you would expect. When we receive goods against a purchase order, in real time we debit inventory and we credit a vouchers payable account. We haven't yet received the invoice from the vendor, but we need to have that offsetting credit. So vouchers payable is really a clearing account. When the voucher comes in, then we do through a three-way match through our vouchers and adjustments screen. So you can see, what did I buy, what did I receive, what is the vendor invoicing me for. You can set up rules on that particular form to say if they invoice me for greater than or less than a percentage of the order, do I want to hold that out? Do I need secondary approval before it moves on? But then, of course, vouchers get posted. We have a really nice payment processing flow where you can select all the open vouchers for the last 30 days, anything due by the end of the week, take early prepaid discounts. That puts everything into a batch. You get a printout of what's about to be paid with detail, hand that to a paying authority. They can sign off or say, don't pay this vendor or don't pay that vendor, and then run your checks or your fund transfer if you're paying by EFT. You can put individual vouchers on credit hold. So you may pay the vendor's other invoices, but not this one. Or you can put a whole vendor on hold. You wouldn't pay any of his invoices until the dispute is resolved.
How about interfaces with credit card companies?
On the AP side, I regret to say no. We don't have any interfaces with credit card companies from an AP side. We do from the AR side. Today, what our customers are doing is you can download those transactions from your credit card company in a CSV format, and you can actually upload them into the software. We just don't have the automated interface that will read them and bring them in. You have to do a two-step manual process to bring those payments into the system.
If we wanted to assign those costs to specific jobs, would there be an easy way to import that information into the system and assign those costs?
Yes, and actually you can do that through the AP module. You can assign it to specific projects. through AP. If it's a job on the floor, so there's a couple of different terminology definitions here. We refer to jobs as jobs on the shop floor. So I'm making banners, or I'm making a model or a sculpture. And for a job on the floor, you're reporting labor and material directly to that job. If someone wants to go out and buy material, they would generally issue a purchase order for that, receive the material in, and issue it to that job on the floor. Separate from that is what we call service orders. Now, a service order is a good example of that. Is you're going to send a technician out to the field, and they're going to do an installation. They're going to have a credit card. They're going to have expenses, hotel, meals, whatever. So I've got this service order, which is billable to the customer, and the technician can report his expenses and his credit card information directly on the service order as those expenses occur. So they'll accrue on the order. There's also a flag there, are we reimbursing that technician? In some environments, the technician uses their own credit card, or they may even be a third party. So we'll set it up as an expense to the service order, but at the same time we'll set it up as an AP to reimburse the vendor, or the technician. Some of the terminology is, this module can be used for many things. This is our service module, but in the case of what you're doing, we're going to have service orders with dispatching of partners to go out to do particular operations on those service orders. The service order may say installation. I might have 5 different steps or operations involved that I want them to report on that installation. And they can have various material costs, labor costs, and miscellaneous costs such as hotel or car. These are all posted as transactions into the service order. And then based on rules you set up, we're going to invoice those different operations, steps, and materials across that service order. So I think from where I sit and what little I understand of your business today, when you're doing installations in the field, I really envision that this is what you're going to use to do those.
I'm pondering that. Because most of what we're doing, we're making something here, and then we're taking what we've made and we're installing it. And we consider that all part of one job.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that I'm confused. I don't think we want to split that up.
Okay, we can do it that way as well.
Okay. You've given us a lot to think about, and so I'm generally not stumped, but I'm overwhelmed with how much it can do.
In a good way?
In a good way. Oh, while we're here, can we look briefly at the payroll and how it might interface with Paycom, which is what we're using today?
I can tell you at a high level, SyteLine includes a full payroll environment, but it sounds like, what was the payroll service name again?
Paycom.
Paycom? Okay, so you want to use Paycom to actually cut the checks, do the taxes, and so forth?
I mean, because if we were to use this system, you don't offer a tax filing service, do you?
Not for tax filing, no.
Yeah, so that we do it ourselves.
Yeah, we have a lot of customers who use our payroll system if they are single state employers, but as soon as they start to get 3, 4, or 5 states of employees, they go to services like Paycom or ADP or Paychecks just for those tax services. It just makes life easier. So in that situation, we include inside of SyteLine what's called an external tax interface. It doesn't show on this diagram, but fundamentally you can use our software to do time and attendance, trap employee hours, set up employees, do HR, track their salaries, and so forth. When you collect their hours and you then input into our payroll system their vacation pay, their sick pay, any bonuses, then you run this external payroll interface, and it takes the resulting hours and bonuses and sick pay, etc., and exports that to an ADP import file. Most of the services we worked with will accept the ADP format. Some of them need us to modify that format a little bit, reorganize columns and such. But you upload that ADP file to your payroll service, and then they process the payroll.
Okay. We did think of a couple other things. Sales tax. We didn't really talk about sales tax and what the system might do for us from a reporting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we've got a couple of things going on with tax codes. Built into SyteLine is the tax code system. You see that here. So I can say I've got taxes in Franklin County or Delaware County, and both of those roll up to the state of Ohio. So in most tax districts, there are 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 levels of taxes. I live in Denver, and we've got Denver city tax, and we've got regional transportation tax, and we've got Colorado tax at the top. And you would set that up as a hierarchy here, where perhaps Denver reports to regional, regional reports to state. And each one of those has a different tax rate that you would manually populate. Then at the customer shipped to record, you indicate what tax code that customer falls under. So if I give someone Franklin, they're going to get 0.75% tax in Franklin County plus Ohio, which is down here 5%. They get 5.75% tax in total for the sale, unless the items that we sold them are flagged as non-taxable. And then built into SyteLine, we have tax reports that are going to report for each taxing district on this list the total sales, the taxable sales, and the non-taxable sales. Now this is very workable unless you sell in hundreds of different taxing districts. If you have nexus across the country, at that point, we recommend a partner of ours called Avalara. Avalara has a product.
Yeah, we're using that already.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, we have an optional integration with Avalara. It's a standard product off the shelf for us. You hook this up with Avalara. You don't use this table, and we talk directly with Avalara, and Avalara not only calculates the tax on each sale, but validates the address of that sale to make sure it's a valid address.
Do you have time commissions? Does it do any tracking and calculating? So
I'll preface this with saying that almost everyone I've dealt with has had to do customizations to the commission system because, I don't know what it is, sales managers come up with really creative commission calculations. Well,
we're in flux now, so show us what you can do, and then we'll build our plan around it.
I'm trying to remember now the right form. Fundamentally, you of course set up your salespeople, and a salesperson, in this case Mr. Simpson, he rolls up to a sales manager, CPR. The salesperson can be an outside vendor or an employee, and that just is driven by this checkbox, and that determines whether we're going to pay that person through accounts payable or pay them through payroll. Then you set up by product code what that salesperson's commission percentage is. So that percentage is going to be based on total sales revenue. One of the first customizations I see people do is, no, I want to pay the guy based on margin. Okay, so we tweak the stored procedure and we make them pay it on margin. But that's
and
as far as the build.
That's included in with the system, or would that be an additional cost to us when you say tweak the system like that?
It would be an additional cost, but it's minor. Unless you have some really fancy commission system. But if you're just doing it based on margin, or you want to do some tiers, maybe the guy wants he gets 5% for sales up to 100,000 and 8% up to 300,000, something like that. Those tend to be customizations to the stored procedure, but they don't take a lot of time from our side. You might be talking.
How about?
Pardon?
Okay. How about paid versus unpaid? Meaning, is the invoice paid?
Yes.
Have it collected?
So there is a system-wide parameter that you set Are commissions payable upon invoice or upon payment? And that's
Okay.
system-wide. And then over here, let's see, it's called commissions due, I believe is the right screen. Here you can see for any given invoice, so here's a customer order, the order day, I shouldn't say any invoice, any order. What was the commissionable amount to the salesperson, and the sales manager can get an override over here. How much of that commission has been earned? Meaning, if it's earned on invoice, then that was invoiced, or if it's earned on payment, then that's the payment. It has been done. And how much have we paid?
Is there anything we didn't ask that we should have?
Oh, there's a lot more to the system. Cost analysis tools, job costing tools. Well, we have standard cost analysis tools that let you do what-if scenarios. What if I change my standard cost? What if I increase my overheads? How does that affect my margin? Those are built into the system. So we mentioned the Dunning tools. We have cash flow analysis tools that tell me, based on my outstanding invoices, my outstanding customer orders, their ship date, the terms, my AP, etc., what's my cash flow for the next 5 periods. SyteLine has various types of production jobs. So here we're going to track any labor issued to a job or material issued to a job. This can also absorb machine time and overhead. We also have what's called just-in-time production and production schedules and work center schedules, and all of this feeds into a journal into the general ledger. All right, well that runs. So here's a summary report of job costs. Now, it takes a little bit of explanation to get you oriented, so let me step you through it. If I'm a standard cost environment, then this column would say, to make this WA37 wheel assembly, we're going to make 200 of them. It would show me my standard costs for that. If I had an estimate that I had built, it would show me my estimated costs. When I released the job to the floor, I may have tweaked the job. These were the costs at the time I released the job. These are my what we call a current routing and bill. So this is the routing and bill that I initially copied to the job. It was the same. I didn't change it after I copied it. And then here's my actual costs reported to the job. And I've got this set to compare plan to actual. So I can see my variance here between this number and this number. Well, my current is the same as well. So I went a little bit over on this, and I can see I went over primarily in my runtime and as a result in my overhead, which was associated with my runtime. So this is at a summary level, and then you can get detailed cost reports like this one. Same job in this case, but now I'm going to show by operation. It says first operation, what was my setup in runtime, and again, this is 100%. Now let's go down here a little bit further. Find our actual hundreds. Here's that 113% right here. These materials, these spokes, and this inspection operation. So here's inspection. They received 1,200. No, that's that unit. Here's the unit cost. Here it is. So it should have been $1,200 of labor. It was actually $1,370 of labor. That's 113% over. And then in summary down here are numbers. So you can get as much detail as you wish about the job itself, or summary.
Okay.
So we're going to show you variances. In a standard cost environment, we're going to show you variances at several levels. You get, for example, for labor, we may have planned or have a standard cost of 10 hours of labor at $20 an hour. We can get somebody reporting labor, maybe they hit 10 hours, but they get paid $22.50 an hour. So we're going to get a labor rate variance in that example. Or maybe they reported $20 an hour, but instead of 10 hours, it took him 11. We post that to a different account. That goes to labor usage variance. Same thing with materials. If material costs more, it goes to the material cost variance. If we used more material, it goes to the material usage variance on those jobs.
Okay. Now you have me thinking. So what are the various ways that you can track the time, the labor time?
So what we typically use is a product like this. Let's pop this open. This is a kiosk that's meant to be out on the shop floor. The employee can walk up to this kiosk, put in his employee ID, and then they get a menu of the available options for that employee. The first item here would be, I'm just going to punch in for the day. I don't know what I'm doing. Or I'm going to set up a job, or I'm going to run a job. So let's take a look at like setup. So what job am I setting up? He might have paperwork in front of him. He can scan in the job number on the fly. Take it. So I took that job. What operation am I working on? I'm going to do the stamping. That's this operation. Actually, let me look at this. No, I can't really do that operation because it's already been completed. Let's go down to operation 40 just for grunts. So you can take that and punch in and send it. Now, what that does is it clocks him onto that job. He is starting a setup transaction. He walks away from the screen. Let's go ahead and do that. He can start an additional job. We let them run simultaneous jobs. Shops that use CNC machines often have one operator on 2 or 3 machines. It shows up here. He's currently running this job. If he's done, he's not going to run another one. He just says done and walks away from the kiosk. Sometime later, he comes back because he's completed it, puts in his employee ID. It shows him what he's running, and it gives him limited things he can do. He can go on break. He can go on lunch. We also, by the way, have automated clock out for lunch and clock back in. Or he can finish. He can end the setup he's on. So he hits end. Says, did you finish anything on the setup? Because in some operations, sometimes they actually make some pieces as part of the setup. He didn't have anything. Maybe he scrapped a piece, and he has to give it a reason code for having scrapped a piece. Okay. So he's just finishing his setup. He didn't finish any pieces, and he sends that off. What do you want him to do next? Okay, I'm going to start running the job. What job? Same job, 140, operation 40. It knows all that already. He says send, walks away, and starts running his job. At any point in time, he could come back to the kiosk and say, yeah, I need to see some information. I need to take a look at perhaps the job routing for this job I'm working on. So I want to see all the notes, everything else, click view. And it shows him the detailed job routing that you designed in the front office on what the different operations are for this job, where they're supposed to occur, what materials are supposed to be used in each operation. You could print that out or say he's done. So he's got lots of functionality here. He could look at paperwork. He could look at documents, videos associated with this job. He could report scrap completions and so on. Well, thanks for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
folks.
Isaac.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.